Today is Wednesday, August 24th, 2011, and we are talking to Arlene Walters. Is that right?
Yes.
And we've never met you before, but we were, your name was suggested by another lady that Joe talked to, and her name is Evelyn Marichal.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you know Evelyn Marichal?
I went to school with her, went all through high school with
Really?
with Evelyn. And there may be even a further connection through, my mother's maiden name was Marichal.
Oh, really?
And she was from the Montgomery City area and also some of them from the Florissant area. And so we think there may be a connection there. But I went to school with Evelyn for all 4 years of high school.
Well, let's back up a little bit and kind of start at the beginning. Would you mind telling us when you were born?
I was born March 27th, 1932, and it happened to be on Easter Sunday. And Easter didn't come again on my birthday for a long time. But I
Does it
was
ever
born-
come again on your birthday?
Yes, it has. It has come twice, but it didn't come for maybe 30, 40 years.
My grandson was born on Easter Sunday 8 years ago.
Well, it had come on the 25th several times, and on the 29th, and on the 28th, but the 27th it didn't. And I've written down somewhere, and I don't remember what it is, but when it was that it came again, but it was 30-some years, I think.
Now, where were you born?
I was born in Kansas City, Missouri.
Oh,
And started school in Kansas City and was in a big city school. And my mother and father were divorced, and my mother came to St. Louis, or to the Bridgeton area, when I was about 11 years old. I was just starting the 6th grade. And when I came down here, we lived for a short time with my aunt, my mother's aunt, who lived in the Hydorn estate.
now when
house.
you say the Hydorn Estate, where was that?
In the old town of Bridgeton, when we moved in there, it was called Bridgeton Township, and it was about, 6 square blocks or so. It was very small. And the landmark that most people will remember is St. Mary's Church.
Which is unfortunately no longer here.
Right. And I drew a little map of that, and but on Natural Bridge Road and Long Road, 1 block south of that, I believe the street was St. John Street. There was a St. John Street and a St. James Street that formed that block, with Natural Bridge, Long Road, St. John's, and St. James. And the church faced St. James Street. The priest's house faced St. John's, and the house right across the street from that was the Hydorn house.
And who was this Hydorn?
Well, from what I understand, he was a doctor, and his offices were in the basement of that house. And it was pretty interesting. I was a kid in my early teens when we lived there, and I had a lot of fun looking into all the little nooks and crannies. And this office downstairs was 2 rooms, and one room had shelves of bottles, the old brown bottles, and all. And then the room behind that was the examining room, I gathered.
Well, let me just tell you, I am also a tour guide for the Payne Gentry House. Have you ever been through the Payne Gentry House?
Yes, many years back.
And in the Payne Gentry House, we also have a doctor's office attached, Dr. William Payne. And it sounds similar to the Payne Gentry House because we still have the bottles of medicine, the labeled bottles that he used. And in fact, the William Richard Gentry that married Mary Lee remarried Anna Hydorn after Mary Lee died. She died rather early age, in her early 30s. And he did remarry Anna Hydorn. So we will have to go through our records and figure out exactly where she is in relationship to Dr. What was his name?
I don't remember the first name, but it is in the book that Bridgeton put out a number of years back. I don't know this for a fact, But at the time that we moved there were still, the estate had not been settled, and there was still a lot of the old furniture and things still there. And the name that came to mind was a gentry who was supposed to be a nephew of Dr. Hydorn. And I don't, as I said, that I don't know that to be fact, but that was what we understood, was the nephew's name was Gentry. And what connection he had with the other Gentrys, I don't know, but I sort of figured there must be.
Well, like I said, William Richard Gentry remarried Anna Hydorn, and they had a son named Frederick.
Mm-hmm.
And so possibly he was considered.
Mm-hmm. Let me throw this in. Here's this is a description of William Henry Hydorn, physician, who was born in 1860 in Bridgeton, and his parents were Frederick and Anna Hydorn, and they were natives of Germany. And let's see, he was married to an Utz in 1881.
Now, they lived up there by Hazelwood,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and that street, there's a street named after
Yeah.
them.
What's Lane?
Yes, and in fact, we have the soldier that's buried at Fifi Cemetery
Yeah, that's right.
that was unfortunately executed right before his pardon came through from President Lincoln.
Mm.
So, well, let's go on. You came to Bridgeton from Kansas City with your mother. Were there any other brothers and sisters with
No,
you?
I was an only child, and as I said, we lived there in the house that was the Hydorn house with my aunt. Later, she moved to Memphis to be with her son, and my mother had moved from there, had remarried, and had moved from there over into Bridgeton Terrace. And then we moved back into the big house for a few years and lived there.
With the new husband?
Yes, yes. And then eventually they left that house and bought another little house on the other side of Natural Bridge Road, down sort of in the center of what was the old little town of Bridgeton. But I went to school then. I had been in the 6th grade in Kansas City, had just started the 6th grade, and then I was put up into the 7th grade there at the Bridgeton Town School. It was a one-room school. I say one room, and I think from what I read in the Bridgeton account, apparently that school was rebuilt a couple times. And the time that I was there, which apparently was the last building, wasn't rebuilt anymore after that, it seemed like, I remember we walked into a little room. At the end of that was a cloakroom, a wall, a big room, and at the other side of this wall on the front was a little library. And I was familiar with that because there was only 2 of us in the 7th and 8th grade.
And
Right. And I was I helped the teacher a lot.
You did?
With the younger kids, and worked in the library and did things like that. The other person that was in the class for the 7th and 8th grade was Herbert Thies, and you'll remember the Thies name.
From the farm, the Thies
Yes,
farm?
They lived on the farm was Long Road and Missouri Bottom Road, just up the hill from there.
Yes.
And yes, I went through school from the 7th grade on with Herbert Thies.
Did he graduate?
Yes, he graduated from there and also graduated from high school with me.
Did you go to Pattonville High School?
Yes, mm-hmm.
Was that the one on the Rock Road?
That was on the Rock Road. Looks nothing like it does now.
Sure.
But at the time that I went to school there was just the one building, and there was the 7th and 8th grade on one end, and then 9 through 12, the rest of the building. And then a few years later, they built a building at the back for a gymnasium. And but I graduated from the school in 1949.
When you went to the school when you were in 7th and 8th grade, did you walk there from your mother's house?
Yes, it was only like about 2 blocks.
Is that all?
Right, right. We lived, it was right there on Natural Bridge, the St. James Street that went up St. John's. We lived on St. John's, half a block, St. James, half a block, and there was the school.
Okay, so this
And
isn't the
this-
Bridgeton School on Fifi.
No. no,
Okay,
no, no.
all right, just was kind of mixed up
No,
on
no,
that one.
No, this was the Bridgeton Town School that was right there on Natural Bridge Road. And if you remember talking to anybody about the Bloom store,
I'm not familiar with it.
okay, well the Blooms, there was a big store right across the street from the school, there on Natural Bridge Road. It was a mercantile type store, had a little bit of everything. It wasn't just a grocery store.
That was on the far side of Natural Bridge?
It was on the north side of Natural Bridge.
Is that where the Telsher store was later?
Telsher's store was farther down the street. And then later on, Telsher's moved from a little store that they had there out to the Carrollton area. But that was much later. But their first store was down maybe a block and a half or so down the street to the east.
Did, in those days, did Banks Road come through to Natural Bridge? That's comes off the Rock Road up by the high school.
Right next to that cemetery.
Mm-hmm. Did
Okay,
that connect
I
to
don't
Natural
remember it being called Banks Road,
Oh, okay.
but there was the school there was just a road went up to the school at that time, and then a road went into the cemetery, and then just on the other side of the cemetery was the highway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and were there houses on that street?
No,
Oh, okay.
no.
Well, that's
And right
probably
across
when-
the street from the high school was some kind of a farm. Was before
across
Northwest
the Rock
Plaza
Road.
went in there, right across Rock Road.
Yeah, the dairy farm.
Right, there was a big dairy farm there, and and Northwest Plaza came along later, and I
Sure.
don't recall what year.
Let's let's talk about your high school years at Pattonville. What was it like? You had more than this Herbert piece then in your grade?
Oh, yes, yes, when, because Pattonville High School included the town of Pattonville, which wasn't Bridgeton at that time, it was the town of Pattonville. And they had the Missouri Baptist Children's Home was there at that time, and there were children from the children's home that went to the high school, and Brannike's store was there at Fifi and Rock Road, and so there were kids came from the Florissant area.
Really?
Yes, because all of the what they call Missouri Bottoms at that time, all of those kids came to the school. Evelyn Aubuchon, at that time they lived on Taussig, and Whitty's lived on their property behind them. Tizons, these were all kids that I went to school with.
How many do you remember graduated? Do you remember?
Roughly around 50 something.
I
It was
see.
in that area.
Were there more girls than boys? Do you remember?
Well, I have a yearbook and I don't recall. It seems to me like it was fairly even.
Okay.
Or maybe a third to 2/3. I can't tell you exactly.
I was just wondering.
I do have the yearbook and I didn't think to look that up.
That's okay. There's no problem. I was just wondering.
But the one of the teachers there at Pattonville School, I had gone to school with, and they were 2 years, 2 and 3 and 4 years behind me, was Reef Stakes. Josephine Reef Stakes was a teacher at Pattonville High School, and they lived on Fifi Road, just north of Gist Road. And she had 3 kids. Edward was the oldest, and he was about in the 5th grade, I think, when I was in the 7th. And Joanne was a year behind him, and Alan was the youngest. And so I went to school with those 3 kids, and then their mother was my social studies teacher when I was in high school.
Okay. What kind of activities did you do in high school? Or did you do other outside activities? Let me ask you that.
Well, by outside activities,
Did you do any sports, or were sports available for girls?
not much. No, they did have on the field, on the area where the educational center is, there at the front on Rock Road. That was the baseball diamond. And that was about all we had was, I think there may have been a basketball team too, but it wasn't too well.
But I mean, for girls, being a girl,
For girls, there really wasn't too much at that time, no.
girls really didn't,
No.
were expected that maybe they would be interested in any sports or anything, were they?
I don't recall there being, of course, I was not really a sports type person, and I don't really recall that there was much of anything in the line of sports, no.
Did you work outside the home while you were in high school? Did you
No.
ever work part-time outside the home?
No, I didn't. And I did not. And I didn't work after I was out of high school. I had several ideas of what I might do and ended up going to Sanford Brown Business College and then also a correspondence course in accounting. And then I went to work for McDonnell Aircraft.
Oh, you did?
Mhm.
Well, that's interesting. A
And,
lot of people we've interviewed, mainly men, have worked at McDonnell Douglas,
Well-
and one man worked, he called it Curtis Wright.
Well, my father-in-law worked for Curtis Wright before, and when Curtis Wright left, then he went to work for McDonnell Douglas in their cafeteria. My husband went to work for McDonnell right out of high school, and he went to work on the labor gang, and then went from there into receiving, and from receiving up into material planning.
Well, let's talk about your husband. When and where did you meet this guy? What is his name?
His name was Carl.
Carl?
And I met him while I was working at McDonnell in their cost accounting department. I had there was a girl who worked in payroll, which was just up in front of cost accounting, and she was dating some young man from out in the receiving department, and Carl was a friend of his, and so that was a blind date. And I don't remember exactly when that occurred, but it was early fall, I think.
What did you do on this blind date?
I don't remember exactly whether we went, probably to a show. And
Did he have a car?
yes, he had a car.
Where did he go to school?
He went to Rittner.
Did he graduate from Rittner?
And he went to the little Home Heights grade school. Are you familiar? It's all gone now.
I know there was a school in Rittner
Yes.
called Home Heights.
Yes, yeah,
Right.
it was right down the street from Home Heights Church, and it's where the Rittner has the athletic field there now.
Okay.
But that was Home Heights School, and my husband went through school at Home Heights, and my kids both went through school at Home Heights.
Really? Okay.
And
Was your
then-
husband older than you?
3 years.
Okay. So he was already, probably had been at McDonald for a while before you got there?
Let's see, I went to work in 2 years. I went to work for them in 49, and he went to work for them in 47.
When you went to work for him, how did you get to work?
How did I get to work? I guess at that time, I probably was riding with somebody. I don't remember for sure. Because
But you didn't have a
I did
car?
not drive a car, no. I did not learn to drive until I was already married a few years.
I think that's pretty common, maybe in women of that era.
Well, my mother drove, and my stepdad his eyesight was not very good, so she drove most of the time. And then after I had my first child, she was taking me places, you know, and then she decided, you know, I should learn to drive, and Carl started to teach me to drive, and that husband and wives teaching each other to drive don't work real well. So I went to Rittner and took a driving course at Rittner.
Well, good for
And
you.
then and got my license, and my mother bought me my first car.
Really?
And
She really wanted you to drive?
yes.
What kind of car did
Yes.
she buy for you?
A little 1979 Chevy Malibu.
Wow, that sounds nice.
And yeah, that was the first new car. That,
Your mother bought it for you.
Yeah. And so.
She
and of
wanted
course,
you to be an independent woman.
She did, plus the fact that she figured that she was going to need somebody to help her out later on too, you know, and, which I did.
Now, where did you, let me ask you, where did you get married?
At Home Heights Presbyterian Church in St. John's.
And is that still there?
No, it isn't. The building is still there, but after we had already moved out here, and we're going back there to church, because, as I said, we were married there and raised our kids there, they decided to merge with Overland Presbyterian Church. And at the time they decided on the merger, Carl says, I think it's time we look for something out here. And so we did. And
what did you find?
well, we ended up, we went to one little Presbyterian church that was on Fifi Road. And that's kind of a strange story, I won't go into that one. But then we went to, there was a church in Bridgeton called John Calvin
Right,
Presbyterian Church.
right,
And the airport took that property. And we stopped there. One day we were out driving around watching the airport progress on the new runways. And we stopped by that church, and my husband went in and to check out, you know, their times and so forth. And we had heard that they were going to be moving into the building on Natural Bridge and St.
The old
Charles Rock
Circuit
Road.
City
The Circuit City
building.
building, right. And they were moving into that the next Sunday after we stopped.
Wow.
And so the first Sunday that they had services in that building, we went.
Is that
And we
right?
were there ever since.
So you go to
It's
John Calvin
Mhm,
at
right.
the present location of Natural Bridge.
Right. And St.
Oh,
Charles
how
Rock
about
Road.
that? All right.
Uh-huh. And but prior to that, when we came down from Kansas City and lived across the street from St. Mary's Church, my mother had been Catholic, married out of the church, and my dad, you know, kind of objected to me being put in the church when I was little, you know, and all. And but when we moved to St. Louis, to Bridgeton, I was in the midst of all my Catholic relatives, and I joined the Catholic Church when I was about 12 years old, and sang in the choir at St. Mary's for a number of years. But when I met my husband, he was from a Masonic background, and and I had come from a broken mixed marriage, and I didn't want that for my family. And so my husband and I found Home Heights Church together and went there a short while, and were married there and joined there.
And you say you had children. Now, how many children? Who do you have?
2.
Okay.
I have a son and a daughter.
And, okay, what are their names?
John, and John has I have my 2 grandchildren, Jeanette and Brian, and they both have just graduated from college.
What? Your grandchildren have both
yes.
graduated from college?
Brian graduated year before last, and because of the job crunch, he graduated with a degree in aerospace engineering, and he couldn't find a job right away. And my granddaughter graduated this last year with a degree in psychology.
From where?
From Oklahoma Baptist University. He graduated from University, Oklahoma University, I guess it is, in Stillwater.
How come they were in Oklahoma? Any certain
Because-
reason?
Yes, because my son, when he graduated from Washington U, he found a job in Oklahoma, in Bartlesville, working for Phillips, subsidiary company of Phillips Petroleum.
Oh,
And he met his wife there
Oh,
in
okay.
Bartlesville. And he's been in Bartlesville ever since.
I see.
And
Now, is your daughter married?
my daughter is married. She works for McDonnell Douglas.
Ah,
We're a McDonnell Douglas
It's-
family. My
how about-
father-in-law worked
yeah.
for McDonnell Douglas. My husband worked for them. I went to work for them. I was there for about 8 years. And then my daughter, when she graduated from Washington U, she went to work for them.
there's just a lot
Yeah.
of people we have interviewed that have worked for McDonald's. A lot of them met their husband or wife from McDonald's. Truthfully.
Yeah, I did. I had two dates that weekend, blind date with my husband and a date with an engineer,
Uh-huh.
and ended up marrying Carl.
So where did you go to the movies on your date?
Well, I don't remember exactly, but there was a little gym theater there in St. John's.
Uh-huh.
And also, of course, drive-ins were very popular then. And I can remember going to the Airway Drive-In there in St. Anne's numerous times.
Present Shop and Save.
And so I don't remember. And we had several other couples we went to dances and things with. There at St. Mary's Hall, went to lots of dances at St. Mary's Hall. Henry Nichols was old German band.
Now, where does your daughter live? You said your daughter works for McDonnell Douglas. Where does she live?
She lives over here in Harmon Estates now.
She does.
She lived in Hazelwood for her early part of her married life, and then they bought a house over here in Harmon Estates.
Was she affected by the tornado on Good Friday of this year?
No, in
Oh.
fact, they didn't even where she lived. They lived in the western section of Harmon Estates. Excuse me, please. I'm sorry.
Joe, do you want to turn it on? Can you stop it?